Welcome, everybody, to this Ask Me Anything session with Mr. Vlado Koylazov. Did I get your name right, Vlado?
Yes, exactly right.
Cool, cool. I've been working with Bulgarians for the past 10 years, so I should get it right by now, right? I'm Rick. I'm from CG Connect, and I have the greatest pleasure to have Vlado with us today to talk about V-Ray, about the new release, V-Ray 7.3, and of course, to answer to all your questions. We already have a bunch of questions that you guys submitted in advance. We're going to go through those questions first, and after that, we will open to live questions. So I will ask you to save your questions to the second part of our show so everyone gets a shot at asking your deepest questions to Vlado. All right. So Vlado, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you are a very busy man. I can tell, and I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Really excited. This is the first time I'm doing this, so um, curious how it will go.
Yeah, it's a very exciting one, right? So before we start, I'd like to welcome everyone on the chat: Andrea, Stephen, Marco, David, João, Timo, Ludo, Salvatore. We have a lot of people. This is so nice. I'm so glad to see see the community getting together here, and I hope to see you guys on the very next ones. So before we start, I have to ask you one question. I started using V-Ray back in 2001. I was basically a baby back then, right? Or maybe not. But I've always wondered, and I'm going to start with a question from me. Why did you even considered doing something like V-Ray in first place?
Well, I mean, I've always been interested in computer graphics. Since I was a little kid, I got this book that was I didn't understand all of it, but it was a book about computer graphics. So it had pictures of the first Tron movie. They explained how this was done. It explained what ray tracing is. It had some very nice realistic images of glass spheres and stuff. So I was really impressed by this. So I kind of decided that yes, this is what I actually want to do when I grow up. So I found more books on how to do computer graphics. I learned how to program. And then we did the first plugin with Peter Mitev at back when I was at university. That was the first Phoenix plugin, not the Phoenix that we have today. That was a very simple atmospheric effect. And then it was also an interesting time because a number of renders started coming up that could do global illumination, things like Final Render in Brazil and Arnold. And I was really interested in how you actually program a path tracer like that or a renderer like that. So I started doing my own experiments, and they turned out pretty well. So it's been going on for, I don't know, already 25 years almost. So um,
I would say
I
they
guess
turned out pretty well.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, that was kind of what I always wanted to.
Cool. And one thing that I remember from back then, you mentioned Final Render Brazil. Uh, I remember that was probably around when Autodesk started implementing global illumination or radiosity with their software, right? So we're talking about uh, 3ds Vis 4 or something like that. And I remember at that time I was looking for better ways to like improve my lighting, right? And then I tried Final Render, I tried Brazil for reasons, of course, and then I found V-Ray. It was a an alpha version, 0 point something, and I remember that I found it particularly easy to use. Was it something that you had in mind when you started writing the plugin? Like, this should be easy enough so people can actually use? Because I remember like Mental Ray and other softwares, they were like crazy things. Like I couldn't wrap my head around them. And V-Ray was fairly easy in that regard. So was it something that you had in mind back then?
So I guess probably not specifically, but when I write software, I kind of also write it to some extent for myself. So if I like it, then I think it's good enough. And I like things to be simple and fast. So I guess that's part of it. I didn't specifically like, and to be honest, over the years we did maybe make V-Ray a little bit too complicated, and that happens when you like work on something for a long time. But I didn't. I did it in a way that I myself would like it. That happened to be the way that a lot of other people liked it. So I guess that
Yeah, and then
that worked out.
became like the industry standard, and it is until this day that I would say like everyone knows how to use V-Ray, or at least you guys should, right? Now, we have a lot of questions here, and I'd like to start with a question by Jackie Te, who's watching us right now. So the first question would be, where do you see V-Ray heading in the next 3 to 5 years? More towards real-time rendering or continuing to push offline rendering? That's a very good question.
Yeah. So real-time renders are obviously getting more and more capable. So there are a number of them out there. There's Unreal, everybody knows, but there's also Enscape, which is our own real-time render, and there's also Vantage, our own real-time path tracer. And these are getting more and more capable all the time. However, I think we are, first of all, they are real-time renders, but even with them, if you want to render a high-quality final image, they are not real time. They still take a few seconds or a few minutes to get to a final render. Because at the end of the day, they still pretty much do the same things that we do in V-Ray, like path tracing, reflections, and refractions. And there are cheats that happen to, like in an interactive situation, to achieve high frame rate, but it doesn't mean that the high quality final renders are real time. So first there's that. Second, GPU hardware is kind of starting to, like, development is starting to slow down a little bit. What happens, NVIDIA is releasing hardware less often, so you wait more between generations. And also what happens is that you get more CUDA cores, but you also get GPUs that are more power hungry, and this can only go up to a point. So we seem to be kind of at a point where, and this is why you see NVIDIA doing things like DLSS and denoisers and all that stuff to help get to a real-time performance, even if you don't start with a clean render. So to me, that mostly means that real time is kind of getting to more or less some kind of a plateau where it's good enough, but I don't know if you can stuff everything into a render and it can still be real time, because V-Ray can do a lot of things like motion blur and dispersion and many other shading effects that are really difficult to do in a real-time render. So for me, that means that yes, we'll have real-time renders, but offline render where you do have to wait a little bit, and a little bit could be a few seconds, but it's still going to be a little bit. Offline renders are still going to be there for a while. Now, there's also the other question, like, besides rendering technology for the next few years, what's going to happen with visualization as a whole? And there's AI involved in this, and we will probably have this in the next few questions. So that's a
Yeah.
whole other topic.
But
But you see that we are actually integrating some of V-Ray's Vantage's real-time capabilities into V-Ray. So the latest release was about integrating some of the Vantage real-time stuff into the SketchUp and Rhino viewports, and this will move over to 3ds Max as well. So this blend is kind of happening even today.
And one thing that you just mentioned, that like having the real time viewport and everything, and with technology, there's something real funny that happens is that technology comes out and then people want to use it everywhere. They want to apply it to everything, and then after a while, most people realize that okay, this is not the way we should be going. That takes me, for example, to virtual reality. Like I remember that you experimented like a few years ago with Lavina. back then, and real time, using glasses like Meta's Quest
Yeah.
and everything, and that never actually became a product, right? Even though it was very exciting, it was something that I was particularly excited about, because I'm a freak for VR and stuff
Oh
like
wow.
that. But it never became an actual thing. And I'm not talking about V-Ray or KS software, but in general, right? It's not something that we see happening.
So there is demand for VR, and we see customers asking every now and again, especially for architecture projects, because VR gives you a much better idea of what a space looks like, much better than you get from an image or an animation. So there is still use, and we still have customers requesting support for VR in our various products, but it's a relatively small percentage of all customers. So I wouldn't say that VR went away completely, but it's definitely not as widespread as we thought it would be.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. So, speaking of emerging technologies, we have another question here. In the age of AI, what will be V-Ray's core competitive advantage? That's also a good one.
So first, I want to believe that 3D space in general is as a way to describe a project is still valuable, because and you see people generate images out of text prompts or drawings and so on, but I still believe that having a 3D scene is valuable, if only because you cannot build a building out of a render. You still need the 3D data. But also with 3D, you can do simulations, you can do consistent multi-view renders. Um, you can do all kinds of interesting things with it. So, assuming that 3D as a way to describe scenes is still going to be around, then there will be still a need to visualize those 3D scenes. Um, we see companies like Google and so on trying to generate everything directly as videos or images or even interactive experiences like the Google Genie thing. But those I still think that they have ways to go. Um, Also, AI today is very, very heavily subsidized. We are paying way less than it actually costs. At some point, this will probably go away. So the question is, how much would an AI render cost versus an actual 3D render? Um, and we'll see where that is. But Viri's advantage continues to be the fact that it very accurately represents the 3D scene. It doesn't really make up details, and it also allows people to manually adjust the lighting situations, whether it's daylight or nighttime. Viri is also, to a large extent, an accurate lighting simulator. So if you put the correct lights and the correct materials, you can be sure that what you will get in the end as a rendering, and what you can measure is illumination on surfaces and so on. This is going to be accurate. Other things, usually we talk about photorealistic visualization, but actually a lot of visualization is not photorealistic. Sometimes you want to show a specific aspect of a project and you want to show it in a schematic view. So it can be flat colors, some outlines. It doesn't need to be photoreal. And this is where V-Ray gives a lot of control to achieve a look that you want to demonstrate exactly the features that you want. And this is something that AI cannot really do today. Um, at some point, of course, dealing with AI is very simple and it feels like magic, right? You type a text prompt and then an image comes out. If we can get the same workflow and the same ease of manipulation of 3D scenes, ideally, it wouldn't matter in the end if the final pixels are generated by AI or physically based render, so long as the user experience is kind of the same. And this is probably where I see V-Ray going in the future.
Cool. You mentioned something very important that people often forget about, is that the cost of AI is actually hidden at this point. Because, as you said, companies are subsidizing it, and but we also see reflections of this AI race. For example, when the price of RAM, because it's so expensive right now, so we're actually in a spot that you can't afford the proper equipment to do 3D in a way, because you cannot like upgrading your computer right now is it's something that you should think
Oh,
about very carefully, right? And on the other hand, I would say, and this is from my personal perspective, AI is not there yet, because as an architect, I'm totally used to go into the changing the light's position so the shadow is cast just right to get to the bed, and so I can see more or less reflections of the light in that spot. So it's like it's a fine control that AI does not simply allow, because of the nature of how AI images are generated, right? Because they're a bunch of points that become an image. They're not like a translation of some
yeah,
actual
yeah.
information.
Control is very important. Like it's much easier to just with your mouse grab an object and move it rather than trying to explain to an AI what exactly you want to happen. And the same with lighting. What we found out is that today's LLMs and VLMs don't really understand what it means for light to be coming from left or from the right. Oftentimes in the images that you generate, you see light coming out of nowhere or shadows coming out of like not really logical directions. Um, Sometimes it's fine because if you get a plausible image, that may be all right. But at other times, you do want to be slightly more close to the physical world.
Yeah, I would say that the thing with AI is that the more control you want, the worst the result is going to be.
Yeah,
Like if you just tell Gemini or whatever, like create a beautiful image, it will create a beautiful image. But
yeah.
if you
But as
want,
soon as you start being more specific, like changing specific details, then it becomes very difficult.
one thing that often comes to my mind is that now that this is no longer a barrier, right? Photorealism per se is no longer a barrier, because you can just tell ChatGPT to create a photorealistic image and it will, basically. Do you think that now we are going to see the bad artists more than we were, because now they're, you know, instead of creating great content, they are not able to create great content because they have to be a more prominent part of the process, because AI will do it. So it's not AI's fault that your image doesn't look good, but it's your fault.
If you're asking if we're going to see more AI slop, then yes, we will. So that's
Exactly.
the answer is yes. And we're already seeing this like everywhere I look. It's a little bit crazy out there.
And it looks AI, doesn't it? Like
Yeah, most of the time you can tell.
you can tell it's that HDR look, weirdly
Yeah.
sharp. It's just weird. Let's go to another question here. Do you think tools like Unreal Engine or D5 Render could eventually replace V-Ray? Oh, that's a hot take.
Yeah. Obviously these tools are developing quite fast, and they have gotten to a point where they're actually to some extent competitors to V-Ray. But I think they will replace V-Ray only if you imagine that V-Ray will remain the same. But I don't think that's the case. We're also evolving V-Ray, so we're integrating some of the real-time capabilities of Vantage. Also, over the years, we've added a lot of tools, not just for rendering, but for world building. We added the Cosmos library, we added Chaos Scatter, um, and we'll be adding more of these kind of simplified world building instruments to V-Ray. Um, we added integrated anima, so you can do like people and traffic simulation. We have the whole sky and sun and moon system. So I think these are aspects that we want to make simpler and faster, so that what you get with V-Ray is not just a render anymore, but just a way to create 3D content. Um, of course, Unreal Engine being a game engine also allows many of those tools. However, and you have noticed recently, Epic has trying to refocus specifically on games and not so much on other industries, because this is their main core business. Um, D5 is a new competitor, the more the merrier, I say. So obviously a concern for us, but it's only a concern if we do not do anything. But I think we can offer some pretty competitive features with V-Ray, and ideally offer a better workflow.
One thing that it often comes to my mind when we talk about competing software, and not only about renderers but every software, is that the thing is that the final goal, the objective of each software is to provide you with the tools so you can do your work, right? And in that
Yeah.
sense, I would say, and I know I will be biased, of course, right? This is a very old model T-shirt, but but I'll be biased. But V-Ray is one software that allows you to do anything, literally anything.
That's exactly right. That's one of the main core principles. Like when we started working on V-Ray, we decided early on that we will not particularly target it at any one use case. It turned out that ArcGIS is maybe more popular than others, but you can do anything with V-Ray, and it's used for all kinds of projects. So it's not just ArcGIS. We also have movies done with V-Ray, automotive stuff, and also some really special projects that you can't really do with any other render. V-Ray was also um, designed to fit into a workflow or a pipeline. So we support things like USD. Before that, it was Alembic, but open standards, being able to put content in V-Ray and get it out of V-Ray in a format that works with other tools. That has also been a goal for us from the very beginning.
Yeah, I've heard from big studios more often than not that V-Ray was the key component of their pipeline that allowed them to do a certain project. Like, I won't, say which studios or films I'm talking about because there might be like an industry secret, but stuff that you guys see in the movies, I've seen people saying like, "Yeah, thank God we were using V-Ray because otherwise we wouldn't be able to pull that off."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's very spontaneous feedback. It's not like I was not asking anybody, really. People just happen to know
absolutely.
that I
Yeah,
work here and they're like, "Yeah, you know what, Rick? Thank God for V-Ray." Really.
awesome stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and there's also like obviously both Unreal and V5 have free versions. So there's that. V-Ray currently um, does not have a free version except for the V-Ray for Blender, the so-called Community Edition that we just released, which is our kind of first experiment having a free product, basically. So I'm really curious to see how that will. It's already picking up very nicely, so that's really good to see.
Yeah. Also, I just want to pick one of the questions that are on the chat. We're going to get to those later, but Marco asked something that has a very easy answer. He asked, "Can you mention a movie that was recently developed using V-Ray?" And I will invert that question. Can we mention a movie that was developed without V-Ray?
Well, I can. The only thing I can probably tell you is of the 10 movies that were shortlisted for visual effects Oscar awards this year, all of them used V-Ray in some form or another. So there you go.
And then you drop the mic, right? So, speaking of pipeline, another question here. In a 3ds Max plus V-Ray pipeline, where do you see the biggest inefficiencies? I guess that
So
would depend on the pipeline, right? I mean, the pipeline is
yeah,
much more than two softwares.
yeah. So for me, actually, the biggest problem stopped being the actual rendering a long time ago. It actually the biggest inefficiency is building your scene, adding the details, setting up all the lights, doing all the asset population. And beyond that, you have animation, choosing good camera angles, and so on. These are the things that take the most time. And I hope that these are also things where AI can be very useful. We did a prototype of a tool that can, for example, you select an object in the V-Ray frame buffering. It gives you a list of materials that could be suitable for that type of object, and it kind of looks at all the surroundings, and it recognizes that, okay, this is a couch, so here's a bunch of materials that you can use for a couch like this. And you can imagine that you can scale this up, and you can get to a point where you can say, well, assign materials to all the objects in my scene in a meaningful way, and the software will do it for you. So to me, that's kind of where the biggest efficiency could come from. Or you could, for example, at some point say, well, this is my basic scene, just fill it with details like stuff like tables and chairs and vases and flowers and whatever, and it will do it for you.
Yeah, that reminds
Um,
me of a phrase from Rafael Grassetti. You probably know him. He was the art director for God of War, and I remember when they released Unreal. I think it was Unreal 5 with the uh, how is it called, Nanite, with the
yeah,
very micro geometry, and people were so excited. And he was the only person that said, "Yeah, good luck in filling all the detail in your next game."
yep, yep. So that's the I think where things today are very inefficient. Like building a scene from scratch, even if you have the base model, there's still a lot of work. And I think this is an area that can be improved a lot by software, with or without AI. AI, what we found today, is not really very good at spatial understanding, so it doesn't like it's really hard to get uh, an LLM, like an AI model, to place models in your scene because it has no idea of space and how things relate to one another. But there are other ways to do that. So I don't know. These are also things that we're exploring.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And speaking of, hard work, there's a question here regarding pricing, and I would say that those are two questions that we can make one. The first one: how do top-tier studios using V-Ray justify premium pricing, and what differentiates a $100 render from a $500 to $2,000 render? Pricing is very subjective, right? In that sense.
Yeah, I guess. What our customers, especially larger studios, and that goes both for architecture firms, but also movie studios or other customers, what they expect from our products is, first, they need to be reliable. They need to work in a wide variety of situations. They need to be able to render millions of frames without fail. Also, flexibility. If you are paying for a tool, you expect that it should be able to do most of the things that you ask from that tool. So this is, as I mentioned, we try to make V-Ray as applicable to as many situations as possible. Also, V-Ray has additional systems around it. The Cosmos library is one, but we also have things like cloud collaboration. We have our rendering, um, our cloud rendering system, and also V-Ray fits really well in a larger pipeline. As I mentioned, this is something that people is like, you cannot imagine how much effort it is for us to support USD, the Universal Scene Description format, but we do it because our customers expect it from us. So there you go. Another question: what differentiates a 100 render from a 500 $2,000 render? So you can kind of understand this question in two ways. Like, if you take a render to mean an image, and like if you charge $100 for an image versus 2,000 for an image, what do you expect out of that? Um, I guess what I would expect from a more expensive render is, first, to be more accurate, and then to be pleasing, but also to tell a story. Like, a good image always tells some kind of story. Even if the basic setting is still the same and it's still the same project, you can, by the way you do the lighting, by the way you assign like assets and place them in the scene, you can tell a very different like you can create a very different impression. And I think this is what you get out of a render that costs $2,000 or something like that.
Yeah, I would say that value is subjective in a sense. So, for example, if you talk to a large that, and that's why I kind of merged the two questions, because if you talk to a studio, they say, for me, the most value comes from being able to do whatever we need to do with the software. So
Yeah,
if I'm paying, like, I have a $1 million budget, if I'm paying half of it just to have a software that will allow me for sure to get to the result I'm being paid for, I'll pay for it. It's not even a question. It's not about asking can we do it. It's how and when we're going to do it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'd say that
exactly.
that justifies the price to anything really, not only software but hardware as well. Like, you guys at home, you probably spend a lot of money buying that very expensive laptop. Why? Because you like technology? Maybe, but probably because you know that with that equipment you will be able to do your job for sure. You won't struggle with it. And the same goes for the renderings. Like, okay, this is a 100 or this is a 1000. It depends on which value you're looking for. Sometimes you're looking
Yeah.
for accuracy, sometimes you're looking for storytelling, or maybe a visual style. Who knows? So it really depends on the product you're willing to buy. Now, what do clients, speaking of, buying, what do clients actually pay for when they choose high-end visualization? Again, I think that that would be like basically what we just discussed, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, that's accuracy. The image should represent accurately the model. It should be consistent. Like if you do multiple views, they should be the same thing. It should be also grounded in real world physics, like lights producing accurate shadows, having the right relative intensities, but also the ability to go back and revise if the customer comes back and says, I like the image, but I want you to change some aspects of it. You should be able to do that and change just that, not regenerate a completely new image. Also, as I mentioned, visualization is not always about photoreal stuff. Sometimes you want to show more schematic views or want to isolate specific aspects of the project to show. And this is what high-end visualization allows you to do.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into the next question that would be like, how will AI change V-Ray's role? Because again, it always depends on what the client is looking for in an image or an animation, right? And now we have a new set of tools that we generally call AI, but it's actually a bunch of
Yeah,
tools.
yeah. So for us, we look at AI rendering as more like a different render engine, so different way to produce images. Um, where we see people finding use for it is usually in the early stages of a project where you don't really have a model yet, or you don't have a clear idea what you want to do, but you want to very quickly produce several different variations or options, and then pick the one that is most appropriate. We also see AI used for post-processing, whether that's upscaling, enhancement, also video generation. It's especially for simple camera moves, it's a lot easier to just take first frame, last frame, and have AI generate the rest. So these are all things that might have required V-Ray in the past, but now you just need V-Ray for those keyframes. Um, what we also see sometimes rather than using V-Ray to generate the final image, you kind of use it as a prompt to generate something that you can then feed to an AI to enhance and make beautiful and so on. The one thing that is not changing yet is the part where you need to build a 3D scene, and it needs to be a 3D model that you can interact with and accurately represent. So this is still where um, V-Ray's advantages are. Um, but yeah, some of the work in early ideation and video generation that is already quite easily done with AI. So the role of V-Ray changes. Things that might have gone to V-Ray before now can be done with AI. But it is what it is. At the same time, V-Ray is evolving, so we want to focus more on the scene building aspect um, of working with 3D. So yeah, things change.
Yeah, and since you mentioned, like, it's all about world building, like it ties with the prompt thing. Like, are we becoming prompt directors because of that? And I think that from what you said, it's actually a no. Vlado, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So just again, what I was saying is that the next question would be like, do you see artists becoming like prompt directors in the future? And taking
Yeah.
from what you said, it's probably a no, right?
Well, not completely. Like we're at the point where an artist has to use AI. To what extent exactly, that depends, and in which stage of a project also depends. But some ability to work with AI is expected. So yes, the ability to produce a prompt that works for a specific use case. Yes, this is needed. Hopefully, that's not what people will end up doing all the time. So I believe there's still a place for an artist to work in 3D with actual objects and physically based lighting and materials and so on. So um, yeah, some prompting will be needed, I'm afraid. Hopefully not for everything.
So we will have to learn how to write properly. Really,
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like,
it's a
we'll
whole
see.
new
We'll
set of
see where it
skills.
goes. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so now we have the last four questions from our list, and then we'll move on to the live ones. So this question is from Santiago Castro. V-Ray free for students, Maya Personal Learning Edition, and V-Ray for Blender commercial work.
yeah.
What's the role you see
This
on
is
the?
what I wrote. Yeah, this was kind of the answer to my question. If the question was, is there a free VRA for students? So we have two things that are the free: the VRA for Maya Personal Learning Edition, and then VRA for Blender Community Edition that we recently released. And actually, the VRA for Blender Community Edition can be used even for commercial work, so not just for students. These are the things that we have today. For the rest of the integrations, we do have an educational version, costs a lot less than the official version. I myself would love to be able to provide everything for free to students, and I hope that is somewhere in the future. But for the moment, we have those two options: my personal learning edition and Very for Blender.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that the V-Ray for Blender, the community edition, is a pretty sweet deal, really, because you use two free commercial grade tools, and you get to learn and you get to better understand it. So it basically removes any entry barrier. If you're thinking
Yeah,
about, I wouldn't say like you have to move from one render to another, like leave Psychos forever and come to the V-Ray side of the force or something like that. But it gives you the opportunity to find out what's best, because maybe some people are constrained to what one software can do because they don't have an option. And I
yeah.
think it's always good to have options, honestly, and to
We
learn.
well, we already see quite a nice pickup in the community edition of Very for Blender, so that's actually good to see. It means that there is some serious interest.
Yeah, yeah, and that helps. And honestly, that helps also cycles. Since we're talking about Blender, it helps cycles to get better, because people will start seeing what V-Ray has and what they like about V-Ray that they don't see on cycles. And I think it's a mutual benefit in a way. And for us as well,
Yeah,
we can learn
absolutely.
what's great about cycles and see ways to maybe implement some features like that in the future. So I think it's a win-win situation, to be honest. Uh,
That's the idea. Yes.
Yeah, cool. And now we have a question regarding two questions regarding uh, V-Ray for Cinema 4D. Basically, asking about because I'm trying to summarize both. Uh, they're always released a few months later. They don't include all the features that Max users have. Of course, there are differences between releases, not only because of the dates, but also because of what you can do for each host software, right? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So VA for Cinema 4D for us is kind of it's a little bit. slow on the, like, we have, well, a small number of users, so unfortunately that number is not going up. Cinema 4D already has a very good built-in render. Redshift comes with Cinema 4D, and it's a pretty good render. Whether it's better than V-Ray, we can argue about this. But what we're seeing is it's kind of similar to a situation that we had with V-Ray for Modo. There is just very few reasons, specific reasons to choose V-Ray for Cinema 4D over other solutions out there. And it's one of our less successful integrations, sadly. So that's why we kind of have to be careful about how much effort we dedicate to that. So um, yeah, it's unfortunate. I would have liked Very for Cinema 4D to be more successful, but it's difficult.
Yeah, and of course we need to have in mind that different hosts require different integrations. So something
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
very easy to implement, let's say on SketchUp, may be
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
tricky to
yeah.
implement on Macs, for example.
We basically have a separate team of developers working on each integration. So there's a team working on Vue for 3ds Max, for SketchUp, for in Rhino, and so on. And we obviously try to keep the sizes of the teams relevant to the user base, to how much money we are actually getting out of a given integration. And as I said, the V-Ray for Cinema 4D team is pretty small because of the small number of users.
Yeah. So the last question we have from our list, this one is from Devanand Chandran. How much AI helped to simplify ArcViz workflow with Chaos products? I think we've been through that already, right?
I would probably just mention a couple of things that we have today. One is the AI material generator that we have as part of Cosmos. This one is useful if you have a diffuse texture and you want to generate the rest of the PBR maps for it, like the roughness, the normal map. Then we have the AI enhancer, which is part of our cloud collaboration system. It allows you to enhance specific aspects of the scene, like people and vegetation, which are typically very difficult to do in 3D. Then we have the upscaler. Also in our cloud collaboration, you can upscale an image up to 2 times, up to 4 times, which saves quite a bit. It's actually quite a good upscaler, and it can save quite a bit of render time. And we'll be adding even more AI tools. So we also, I don't know how many people are aware, but we also have a product called Verus, which is specifically for early ideation, AI generated images, and so on. And we are looking into ways to integrate that with V-Ray. But also we're looking into ways to use AI to work with the scene. I mentioned some of the experiments that we're doing with material assignment, but also asset placement is an interesting topic. Camera, choosing suitable camera angles, and all kinds of 3D scene manipulation. We're also looking into our own so-called AI assistant, which is kind of similar to a chatbot, but a little bit more capable. So the idea is that you will be able to ask questions about your scene. Like you can ask it literally, is this a good image or not? Or how can I improve my render? And it will tell you what you need to do. And hopefully one day, maybe even do it for you. So more stuff is coming, to me, way more exciting than what we have today. So yeah, hopefully people will appreciate it.
Yeah, I can already see people going like, please, how can I make it not suck? Right? Because
Yes.
we all get to that point at sometimes, people, you know that. Now, let's jump into the live questions. So we have the first one here. I'm going to put that on screen. With a new AI tool coming out every other week, do you think that V-Ray or any other chaos tool will be a winner at the end?
If you're asking whether we will be able to generate better images than any AI out there, I don't think so. With the way these things are improving, I think that AI generation will be kind of a part of our lives. I don't think that will completely replace traditional rendering for the reasons that we already discussed. but at the same time, it's a reality that we have to accept that AI renders will be with us for the foreseeable future.
We have a long one from Onyx Lee. Uh, I won't be able to put the whole thing here, but let's read it. Since Chaos is also developing tools for virtual production, if V-Ray could directly write the results of sample tracking into Gaussian splats, this process could shorten the existing GS training workflow dramatically and really make V-Ray a killer app that brings any 3D scenes into VR, web embed, and virtual production effortlessly. This feature could make the biggest jump in the CG industry in decades. A potential scientific and technical awards candidate. Okay, that sounds like a plan.
Yeah, so we have been looking into generating Gaussian splats. Obviously, you can still do this today simply by rendering a bunch of images and training the splats on them. So, and we have customers doing this. Basically, instead of delivering a set of images to the customers, they are delivering a Gaussian splat that you can view in your browser, and the user can, the client can walk around the model themselves. The There's a brute force way of doing it, just again, as I said, rendering a bunch of images. We believe that we can make this more efficient by integrating the Gaussian spot generation directly in V-Ray, and that is something that we are researching, but it's not ready for final users yet. So it's a matter of like we need a little bit more time to figure out a good way to do it.
Okay. Next one. Is there a possibility of more documentation and tutorials on using V-Ray within Houdini and Solaris? I have some issues getting V-Ray and Cosmos assets to work well in Solaris.
Yeah, so this kind of ties to previous discussion that I had. We had a small but very dedicated user base for Houdini, so the amount of resources that we can spend on that is limited. But I would encourage you to either post on the forum or even contact us directly. My email is all over the place, and I have Facebook and LinkedIn and everything. And we'll try to help. I realize that it's a little bit scant on resources, um, but that's the situation that we are in.
All right. We have another one. What chaos have in mind to compete with D5? Because it's offering a lot of free licenses. We see something similar for Blender.
So we have we discussed the community edition view for Blender. It doesn't include everything that eventually we would like, so it's still a work in progress project. There will be more stuff coming up. But yeah, eventually we do want to be in a competitive position regarding D5. And obviously D5 is a real-time tool, so we need to figure out how to integrate Vantage with all this. There are also a bunch of, so D5 is evolving quite fast and we need to keep up. So that's on our end to do that, yes.
Cool. What's the future of Phoenix FD now that Svetlin has left? How do you see the competition or
Um,
partnership with Tyflow?
yeah, so Phoenix for us has been there are a few things here. First, we see that the need for this kind of product in 3ds Max has diminished over the years for several reasons. First of all, a lot of the simulation work that used to be done in 3ds Max moved to Houdini, and Houdini is very good at simulating fire and smoke and explosions and all that stuff. Second, even though I was begging the Phoenix team to look into GPU simulations, sparse simulations, that didn't happen. So the Phoenix core is quite old. And in the meantime, you got products like EmberGen and LiquidGen and FumeFX and Taking Particles adding GPU accelerated simulations. So Phoenix couldn't really compete with those. And at some point, it just didn't make sense for us to develop it anymore. So we also got built-in fluids in 3ds Max, which didn't help. And also, at the end of the day, there were really just a handful of people using Phoenix. There are some good bits and pieces in Phoenix, particularly the ocean texture that we want to take and integrate in V-Ray as a V-Ray water texture. So we will do that. And we might still in the future provide some way to do simplified like water simulation that will be useful for things like lakes and pools and things like that. But we would leave the more full scale, fully dynamic simulation to other tools.
Mhm. Now, there's another question here regarding AI bots. I think it's a very interesting one, but I'm not sure uh, you will be able to answer to this one. But here it goes, nevertheless. Is it possible to create an AI bot or Gemini gem to host the knowledge base, just like in a real developer assistant? It will be even better if this bot can access the abundant knowledge from the forums. That sounds like a good idea, doesn't
Yes, which is why we are working on it.
it? Okay, so that's probably the answer Onyx wanted.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's a question here. I'm not sure I get it from Olivier. OFC geometry in GPU. Not sure I get this one. Okay, so Olivier, if you could elaborate on that. Another one. Any updates for V-Ray for Unreal Engine?
Um, no, that one really had like the number of users I could count on like the fingers of my hands. So it's kind of already dead, unfortunately. It didn't make sense. And also Unreal added their own path tracing engine. So it just didn't make sense for us to have View. And it was also like Epic doesn't make it easy to get data out of Unreal. Unreal is very good for putting stuff in, but it's very difficult to get data out. So for us, it was a constant struggle to be able to figure out how to get the geometry, the material information, and all those things. So it just didn't make sense for us.
Yeah, we have to remember that we are always dependent on the software developer anyway, whether they allow us to do something or not. Right. In the end, it's
Yeah.
about that. Uh, Considering the newest edition of Quicks and Caustics, which by the way, I love it. How do you see the further development of classic V-Ray caustics, especially the eventual GPU support? Before you answer to that one, that reminds me of something that like back in the day 2001, when V-Ray started featuring caustics, and I remembered that I exchanged some emails with you again 25 years ago or something, because they were not working, and you taught me a trick using a spotlight and it's a few configurations, and it was so quick, and I assumed that everyone in the world knew about that. I was probably the last person to learn, and then I learned that probably I was the only one who knew about that, because every time I showed that to people, people would be like crazy, because caustics is so impressive every time it's pulled off properly. So let's return with it again. So, how do you see the further development of classic V-Ray caustics?
So there are a few things that we want to improve there, especially with the setup. Right now, it's still a little bit complicated to figure out the number of especially with the sun, you need to figure out like where to place the sunlight and what radius to use, and this can be done automatically. So this is something that we want to explore. We already implemented progressive caustics and they work fairly well, but we want to improve that as well. Eventual GPU support, we actually do support caustics on the GPU photon mapped caustics for quite a while now. I think for a couple of releases we have supported these, and we will continue to expand that support. Right now it's a little bit limited in terms of materials and lights, but eventually we do want to have full caustic support on the GPU. So there will be a final recompile of Phoenix for the latest Autodesk releases, 3ds Max 2027 and Maya 2027. And if you have a Phoenix license, you will be able to use this for as long as you want. I would love to learn a little bit more on the pain points here. I would love to make this a better experience, but it will be great if like you have specific issues or suggestions, either post on the forum or we have this ideas website that you can submit ideas. So I'd love to learn more about this and how we can improve it. So the out of core thing we tried at some point, we couldn't really make it work very well. So we kind of gave up on that. The mega geometry, however, looks really interesting, and I would really love to explore this. Not just for V-Ray GPU, but also for Vantage, for things like displacement and subdivision surfaces. So that's definitely something I want us to look into. We don't really have the perpetual licenses anymore, if that was the question. We do have a standalone version of V-Ray, but it follows the other models. You can buy it either monthly or yearly. So these are unfortunately not decisions that I can control, but I can pass on the sentiment, but yeah, I wouldn't expect any specific changes there. So both of them have kind of, so V-Ray GPU has this out of core texture feature that you can enable, and it does exactly that. The same for Vantage. It has an option that is called dynamic textures, I think, which again does exactly that. Both of those solutions are currently limited to just textures and not geometry. For geometry, like I said, and that was the other question, the mega geometry stuff looks super interesting.